$52 million. That is the number that defines everything that is going to happen in Chicago this year. And if it is not clear why, that number changes everything for Caleb Williams and for this organization. Do not move from this video because in the next few minutes, it is all going to be completely clear. Ian Rappaport and the sources out of Halas Hall are already talking about it, and Ryan Poles has a decision on the table that could be either the smartest move or the most expensive mistake of this whole run as Bears GM. $52 million tied up in an edge rusher that fell apart, got hurt, and is still eating up the cap space. Caleb Williams needs to have real weapons around. That is the crisis. And the solution, the low-cost fix that nobody in the Windy City is really paying close attention to yet, is sitting on the market right now and is not going to wait forever. But that is not the only thing going on in this offseason for the monsters of the Midway. While Poles is juggling that cap space bomb, there is a cornerback that was completely invisible all through the 2025 season and just reappeared at the exact moment this Bears secondary needs help the most. And there is a quiet move, a signing almost nobody noticed that Dennis Allen is going to use as the perfect chess piece when November rolls around and the NFC North is decided in the last few snaps of a crucial game. If this is part of the real Bear Nation and there is trust in Ryan Poles' process, hit that like button right now and subscribe so nothing from this offseason is missed. Bell turned on because what is coming after this video is going to be even more explosive. There is going to be straight talk from the very first second because that is what Bears fans deserve. The most expensive mistake of Ben Johnson's first offseason as head coach was not a bad draft pick, was not a blown tactical decision. It was a contract, a 3-year, $48 million deal for a defensive end that was supposed to be the centerpiece of that pass rush unit. And instead, what the Bears got was a season that can be summed up in 2 words: total disappointment. This is about Dayo Odeyingbo, and before anyone jumps in the comments to defend that signing, the full numbers have to be laid out because numbers do not lie even when they hurt. In 8 games during the 2025 season, Odeyingbo logged 1 single sack, 1 in 8 games for a player that was brought in with the expectation of being a dominant edge rusher. That is not just disappointing, that is a complete performance collapse the Bears cannot just look past. And if that was not enough, in Week 9, Odeyingbo tore an Achilles tendon, which is one of the most devastating injuries a defensive lineman can suffer. All of a sudden, that $48 million investment went from a risky bet to a real-time cap space crisis. Brad Gagnon from Bleacher Report said it flat out: Odeyingbo is the most overpaid player on the Bears roster going into 2026. And here's the truth. When Bleacher Report puts something like that out there with that kind of backing, fans need to pay attention. Now here comes the part that creates the most internal debate, and there is going to be honesty about it. The Bears are not going to cut Odeyingbo, not right now. There is no financial logic in doing that. The trade value is on the floor after a step-back season made worse by injury, and cutting that contract does not really fix the cap problem in a meaningful way. So Chicago is tied to this deal for at least the 2026 season with a cap hit of $20.5 million. $20.5 million for a player that has not shown an ability to stay healthy or to produce at the level that was expected. So here's a direct question. If this job was Ryan Poles' right now, how would that situation be handled? The only short-term smart exit, in my view, is what is being kicked around right now in Bears analyst circles. Add real quality depth to the pass rush without dropping a fortune, and that is where a name comes in that has been sitting out there for months on the free agent market and, in my opinion, should absolutely be on Poles' radar. Kyle Van Noy. Listen to this profile before writing it off because of age. Kyle Van Noy is about to play a 13th NFL season in 2026, is 35 years old, and owns 2 Super Bowl rings. But the most important thing for this Bears conversation is not what has been won. It is what was done just 2 seasons ago with the Baltimore Ravens. 12.5 sacks. 12.5. That is Pro Bowl level production. And Van Noy did, in fact, go to the Pro Bowl that year for someone that age. Those numbers are just flat out wild. Now, last year that dropped to 2 sacks in 15 games. That is a steep decline. But there is, and hear this clearly, a critical bit of context a lot of people gloss over. Van Noy came out of a Ravens scheme that no longer needed the same kind of role and hits the market with exactly what the Bears are desperate for: experience, high-level football IQ, and the versatility to play third down situations without being a liability against the run. Aaron Lemming from Windy City Gridiron has already singled Van Noy out as a logical option for Chicago. And I am right there with that take. Look at the numbers. The Bears defense finished 2025 with only 35 sacks over the whole year, sitting near the bottom of the league in pass rush win rate and in total quick pressures. Those are the kinds of stats that keep Ben Johnson up at night. That kind of pressure does not win playoff games. That kind of pressure does not close out games in crunch time. And if the Bears want to level up from a developing roster to a real contender in the NFC North, they have to make life miserable for opposing quarterbacks on third down. So here it is as clearly as possible. Van Noy on a one-year, low-cost deal is not the ultimate fix for the Bears' pass rush problem. But while Odiingbo rehabs and the team waits for the draft to bring in younger depth, Van Noy can be exactly the kind of situational piece Dennis Allen uses better than almost anyone in the league. Allen knows how to squeeze the most out of veteran players in specific roles, and Van Noy fits that blueprint naturally. Now line that up against what the division rivals are doing. The Packers are pumping resources into the offensive line to keep Jordan Love clean. The Vikings are going to ride with a young group. The Lions already showed they know how to build an aggressive defense. Meanwhile, the Bears have an injured edge rusher eating $20 million in cap and a very real shot to add a proven Pro Bowler on a near no-risk deal. If Poles does not make that call, there is a real chance that decision is going to be regretted when November comes around and the defense has to get pressure in a season-defining NFC North game. The clock is ticking. Van Noy is not going to sit around forever, and the Bears need to make a move that blends financial smarts with competitive urgency. That combo does not show up too often on the free agent market, and Chicago should jump on it before some other team beats them to it. If that caught you off guard, hang on, because the next story is about a player a lot of fans already had buried who just came back to life at the perfect moment for this Bears secondary. There is a special category of NFL players that I call the roster invisibles. These are the late-round picks that show up with modest expectations, disappear before training camp even really gets rolling, and most fans never hear from them again. For the Bears, that player was Za Frazier, the fifth-round pick in the 2025 draft, selected by Ryan Poles out of the University of Texas, San Antonio. And for months, Frazier was exactly that. Invisible. Frazier's situation was unusual from day one. The Bears placed that contract on the non-football injury list before the start of the 2025 season because of what general manager Ryan Poles repeatedly described as a personal matter discovered after Frazier got to Chicago. Poles never went into detail, which is absolutely that GM's right, but the practical result was that Frazier did not practice after rookie minicamp in May, and the rookie season ended before it even had a chance to start. For fans who had been tracking Frazier since the draft, that was a gut punch. This was a 6'3" cornerback with a verified 4.36 40 time at the combine, numbers that in just about any other context would have created way more hype than was actually there on draft weekend. To put it in perspective, 4.36 at 6'3" is exactly the kind of physical profile defensive coordinators look for when they are trying to match up against the biggest, most dangerous wideouts in the league. Those are the measurables that get teams to drop serious money in free agency, and the Bears got that in the fifth round. Then came the NFI list, and then silence. Months of silence, until Frazier broke that silence personally with a social media post that, honestly, was more powerful in its simplicity than most people really picked up on. Medically cleared, thank God. That is it. 4 words and a short line of gratitude, but for anyone who understands what that means in the context of the Bears calendar. Those 4 words represent a complete shift in the outlook for Chicago's cornerback room. Here's the key question: what point of the year does this news hit? It lands exactly when the Bears secondary is more in transition than at any moment in the team's recent cycle. C.J. Gardner-Johnson's gone, Jaquan Brisker's gone, Nahshon Wright is gone, Kevin Byard is gone, Tyreek Stevenson's situation is still up in the air. The Bears are bringing in new pieces like Kobe Bryant and Cam Lewis, but there is a real opening in that cornerback room for a player that can battle on the outside with the physical profile that Dennis Allen prioritizes. The value of what Frazier did during that NFI year is being underestimated. Yes, it is true there was no on-field work. Yes, it is true there were 0 regular season snaps, but that player was in the building, in the team meetings, working with the medical staff, soaking up Allen's and Al Harris's defensive scheme without the physical wear and tear of a full NFL season. For a raw 5th-round prospect, that year of mental reps inside a pro building can be way more valuable than fans realize. Put it another way, how many 5th-round rookies get to the league, get physically beat up in year 1, and never really develop the football IQ needed to hang in this league? A lot. Way too many. Frazier spent that first year learning the system from the inside and now shows up to spring workouts with a year of scheme knowledge that most rookies do not get until year 2. Now, there also has to be honesty about the risk factors because this is not about selling only the upside just to make fans feel good. Frazier was 24 at the time of the draft and is going to turn 26 during the 2026 season without having played a single NFL snap. That is a real data point. A cornerback's development window has biological limits and learning curve limits, and Frazier is already operating near the upper edge of that window for a player with this level of experience. But here's another bit of straight talk. Ryan Poles is not a GM that just makes random picks. The patience that was shown with Frazier all through the 2025 season, including choosing to keep that contract on the NFI list instead of just cutting and moving on, says that this organization genuinely believes in this player's potential. Poles could have moved on from Frazier months ago. That did not happen. And when a top-tier NFL GM chooses to eat the cap hit from a 5th-round pick for an entire season with 0 production, that says a lot about how that player is viewed inside that building. The Bears' 2025 season in the secondary was historic. First in the NFL in turnover differential at plus 22. First in interceptions with 23. Those numbers are insane. And the problem is that a lot of the pieces that drove that stat line are no longer on this roster. The Bears need new playmakers on the back end. And if Frazier stays healthy and comes into spring workouts with the same speed and physical profile that showed up at the combine, there is a real conversation about this contract competing for real snaps in the cornerback rotation during the 2026 season. This is not a claim that Frazier is going to become Chicago's lockdown corner. The point is this. Right now, with all the context laid out, Za Frazier is the most interesting wild card of the entire Bears offseason. And a wild card that shows up medically cleared right when the secondary is searching for answers is exactly the kind of storyline Bears fans should be tracking closely over the next few months. The question is not whether Frazier is going to play. The question is how much and whether that year of mental reps is going to separate this contract from that big group of late-round rookies that never quite make that jump. That is something only the practice field is going to answer. Now it is time to dig into the kind of decision that separates good general managers from great general managers in the NFL. This is not about the blockbuster trade that breaks the internet for 48 hours. This is not about the big name signing that shows up on every national headline. This is about those quiet free agent moves that most fans barely notice, but that defensive coordinators value more than a lot of those big money deals. And that is exactly the kind of move the Bears just made by signing cornerback Cam Lewis. Lewis landed in Chicago after 6 seasons with the Buffalo Bills, one of the best run teams in the AFC in recent years. And that alone already says something. Players do not last 6 years in an organization like that by accident. They adapt, they learn, and they survive in a high-demand environment where the ones that cannot keep up simply disappear. Lewis did not just hang on in Buffalo. There was growth over time, and that kind of developmental arc is exactly what the Bears are hunting when they look for depth in free agency. Look at Lewis's numbers with the Bills and see if this does not look like the profile of a smart, Useful player, 76 games played, 14 starts, 166 total tackles, 11 passes defensed, 3 forced fumbles, and 1 interception. Those are not star stats. Nobody around here is going to pretend Cam Lewis is the second coming of Charles Woodson. But those are the numbers of a player that does the job. That is where there is a need to be, that does not commit the costly mistakes that lose games in the NFL, and that can line up in multiple spots without the level dropping off. And that last part is what matters the most, because Lewis's versatility is what turns this into more than just another depth body for Dennis Allen's defense. Lewis can play outside corner, can play in the slot, and can play safety. 3 spots, 1 signing for a coordinator who has to deal with injuries, specific matchups, and week-to-week adjustments in modern NFL football. Having a player that can line up in 3 different roles without the system losing its shape is a massive gift. Think back to the 2025 season when Kyler Gordon and Jalen Johnson both missed time with injuries. Those are exactly the situations where teams with versatile depth survive and teams without it sink. When Gordon and Johnson were out, Nahshon Wright had to step into a bigger role, and surprisingly, it worked. 5 interceptions in that bigger window of playing time, but Wright is gone this offseason. And if the same kind of scenario hits in 2026 with any of the starting corners, the Bears need someone who can take on more responsibility without the whole structure falling apart. Here is the point with no sugarcoating. Cam Lewis is not going to be the name in the game headline, not going to be the player Bears fans are shouting out when they talk about the biggest moments of the 2026 season, but in the context of Dennis Allen's system, which finished 2025 number 1 in the league in turnover differential and interceptions, versatile depth is not a luxury, it is mandatory, and the Bears were smart enough to see that and move before the market tightened up. The Kobe Bryant signing was the big splash in the secondary this offseason. That is obvious and fair. Bryant comes in with a higher profile and bigger expectations for immediate impact, but across a full NFL season where teams are forced to adjust every single week, the player who could be the smart chess piece often ends up being just as valuable as the starter that gets all the headlines. Al Harris and Dennis Allen have already shown they know how to coach up and maximize defensive backs in this system. Lewis is exactly the kind of player that benefits most from that kind of specialized coaching. There's one more layer here that matters for the full offseason picture. The Bears lost 4 players from the secondary this offseason: Gardner, Johnson, Brisker, Wright, and Byard. 4. That is a major rebuild on the back end, and any fan who thinks that gets fixed with a couple of free agent signings without thinking about depth is missing the size of the challenge. Chicago had to operate smart at multiple layers of the roster, and the Lewis signing is proof that Poles understands versatile depth is just as important as the big-ticket additions. The Packers have their own issues on the back end. The Vikings and Lions are also in transition with their secondaries. None of them has a player with Lewis's versatility profile that can cover 3 spots without dragging down the system. That gives the Bears an adaptive edge that may not pop in a single box score, but is going to matter over a 17-game season plus playoffs. In a perfect world, Lewis is going to be used sparingly, filling specific snaps, giving starters a breather, and popping up in particular situations where Allen needs a schematic tweak. But when adversity hits, and it always does at some point in an NFL season, Bears fans should feel confident that Cam Lewis can step into a bigger role without the defense losing its identity. That is what makes this move smart. Not the headline, not the contract, the precision with which Ryan Poles identified exactly the type of player this system needs to stay functional over a full season. And when December hits and the Bears are fighting for position in the NFC North, nobody's going to be talking about Cam Lewis as just a preseason signing. They are going to be talking about Lewis as the piece Dennis Allen used perfectly when it was needed most. All right, Bears Nation, just went through 3 stories that are shaping the direction of this organization in the most critical offseason in years, and now it is time to hear exactly what this fan base thinks, because on this channel, the fans' voices matter just as much as the breakdowns. There was talk about Dayo Odeyingbo, the $48 million mistake that is going to cost $20.5 million against the 2026 cap, and about Kyle Van Noy as the low-cost fix that could change everything about the Bears' situational pass rush. Here is the direct question. Should Ryan Poles make that call and lock in Van Noy before some other team jumps in, or is it better for the Bears to wait on the draft to find edge rush depth? Drop that debate in the comments because every single take is going to get read. There was also talk about Za Frazier, the fifth-round corner that was invisible all through the 2025 season and just showed up medically cleared at the exact moment this Bears secondary is begging for answers. The straight-up question, does that year of mental reps inside Allen's system turn this contract into a real sleeper for 2026, or is it still way too shaky to hang expectations on a player who has never taken an NFL snap? That debate is huge, and it needs to be in the comments. And there was the Cam Lewis story, the quiet signing that could be the perfect chess piece for Dennis Allen. So here's the concrete question. In a secondary that lost 4 players this offseason, is having a versatile depth piece like Lewis enough, or do the Bears still need to swing bigger before training camp gets going? Now listen up, because this matters. This channel exists by and for Chicago Bears fans. Every story covered, every debate opened, every breakdown dropped. It is all because this community deserves the best Bears content in the Spanish-speaking YouTube world. This community is the reason this thing exists, and every comment, every like, and every new subscriber helps this channel grow and keep bringing the biggest stories about da Bears. If there is no subscription yet, this is the time. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on the bell so nothing Bears-related slips by, because the 2026 offseason is just getting started, and what is coming is going to be even more explosive than everything that was covered today. This community is a family, and if there is love for the Chicago Bears, this is the place. Hit like if the belief is that Poles should sign Van Noy this week. Subscribe if the prediction is that Za Frazier is going to be the biggest surprise on the Bears in 2026. And drop the most controversial take on Odeyingbo in the comments, because every single one is going to get read. Bear down, Chicago. This city does not quit. Da Bears forever.